It affects you at a cellular level. There's all kinds of studies out there that show that holding on to unforgiveness, it affects your health, it affects your well-being, and it affects how we interact with the people that we love. And it's sending us down a road, whether we know it or not, it's sending us down a very unhealthy path.
You are holding on because it's the one thing that you still have control over, but it's not serving you. I know it was not serving me. And there was such freedom, like the weight that was removed, carrying that weight in my life. I mean, I still feel the change, I should say. Like it was so drastic when I just said, I'm finally letting this go.
Here we go. Pictures up. We're rolling. And action.
Yes, we all experience darkness. But yet, we are given hope.
Robert and Kelly Pascuzzi, producers behind the powerful film The Ravine and hosts of the Time for Forgiveness podcast, discuss the theme of forgiving the unforgivable and share their personal tragedy that was the inspiration behind their work.
Forgiving someone is not necessarily forgetting in the sense that there's no accountability. That's not what we're saying. Forgiveness is really letting go. It's really for you instead of carrying this weight.
We don't have control over the events in our life. Things just happen. But what we do control is the meaning. It's the number one thing that we're here on this planet to learn is forgiveness.
Welcome to Motivation Monday. We are here with the wonderful Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. I'm so excited to have you guys here today and hear a little bit about your mission. You guys are the hosts of the Time for Forgiveness podcast, co-producers of the impactful film, The Ravine, and you guys are also the author of The Ravine, the novel. So this is kind of what the film is based on. Yeah, you guys have a very powerful message and mission. Do you guys kind of want to share what that is?
Well, I'll let you start.
Okay, well, so our family went through a tragedy over a decade ago, Natalia, and in the wake of that, we wanted to try to turn a really dark event into some type of light and try to help craft a story around it that could bring a sense of forgiveness and hope. And so that was quite an undertaking. It was an idea that made sense at the time intellectually, but there was a lot of work to be done. And so a lot of work that we weren't really aware of and prepared for. But we went ahead and embarked on that journey. And first, as you mentioned, the novel, then the film, and now what sprung from it, which is something that Kelly and I are really enjoying. We have the Time for Forgiveness show, and we're sitting in our studio here in Kansas City where we interview and have interactions with people that have really compelling stories from all walks of life, all types of scenarios, tragedies, difficulties, triumphs. As we mentioned to you before we started here today, we just interviewed a gentleman that survived the 9/11 terrorist attack and was blind. And that was an amazing story, how he navigated 78 flights down to survive. So those types of stories. And so that's kind of the mission we've been on all along, is bringing this radical message of forgiveness and hope. And it's been just a wonderful journey, and it's growing and growing and growing. And I'll let Kelly talk about the summit, but a lot of great things coming.
We have, as Bob had said early on, this has been quite a journey. And we've had this idea in our heads for quite some time. And there's no better time, I believe, to be delivering a message of hope and forgiveness. And I love the word hope because it offers options. And there's times in all of our lives when the unexpected happens, or we're surprised by something that we wouldn't have asked for in our lives. But I think it's important that all of us always know that there's hope. And I needed that also some 15 years ago. But we have an exciting thing that we're working on this May 30th and 31st. And we've partnered with Church of the Resurrection here in Kansas City. And it's the first Forgiveness World Summit, and we have an incredible line of speakers that are coming in with an inspirational message. But it's not really just entertainment. This goes beyond inspiration. This is going to be a time of transformation, taking people through a process of forgiveness. So we're really looking forward to that.
Well, that's really exciting, and I'm excited to hear about it and see it. And, you know, you guys talk a lot about forgiveness. For someone that doesn't really know what forgiveness is, or to them it's just a cliche word, what does forgiveness mean to you?
What it means to me is I think a lot of people say that they really want freedom in their life. I would describe forgiveness as living emotionally free. And it's an incredible feeling. I think a lot of people do not, or possibly may not believe that they can experience it. But forgiveness to me is really a gift that we give ourselves, but it allows us to live emotionally free.
Yeah, I would just add that to me, it's letting go of any negative emotions that are holding us back, that are causing us to act in a way that probably we're not going to be able to fulfill our God-given ability and mission in life because we're holding on to something that is really causing us to move in a different direction. So it's more about self-awareness and understanding that whatever we're holding on to that is causing us to act in a way that's either in our thoughts or our actions in a negative way, we've got to let it go.
And for somebody that's like, you know what, I don't have to forgive. I've forgiven everybody. I'm good. I'm in the clear. What do you say to that?
Don't have to forgive.
Oh,
Like, I think Dr. Wayne Dyer is one of my mentors, was one of my mentors. He's passed away now, but he said, and I love what he said about forgiveness. He said that it's the number one thing that we're here on this planet to learn is forgiveness. And we have the ultimate example of that through Jesus on the cross. And I think it's our obligation as human beings to learn that message and to live it out. Now, whether somebody wants to accept that message or not, I think it comes down to where they're at in their life and what their experience around forgiveness might have been. I think we talk a lot about origin and what we heard and saw growing up around a lot of different topics, but certainly forgiveness. For example, I grew up in an Italian-American household, and forgiveness wasn't something that we talked about. It wasn't demonstrated. It wasn't offered. The words "I was sorry," I don't remember those being spoken. It was typically just the opposite. So that is when I talk about the narrative, if you will. That's what the narrative I carried into my adulthood. And so Kelly and I, when we're coaching around this, we talk about that. First of all, that's not going to work very well in a marriage. It doesn't really lend to a healthy relationship. But I think, Natalia, to your answer, it's typically how we were conditioned around that topic in our formative years. That's usually how people take that concept into their adult years.
something.
I would also add, Natalia, though, that I think if we're all honest with ourselves, all of us have something that we're holding on to, whether it's in regards to a circumstance or someone else. But majority what we have found is really we're holding on to things that maybe we haven't met up to our own expectations. And it's something that we are not forgiving ourselves that we can let go of. But I truly believe we all have something that we're holding on to that we really can let go if we choose to.
Mm-hmm.
What a wonderful response. Something that kept coming into mind is like, okay, there's something I want to forgive. Can I learn it on my own? Is there a way to learn how to forgive? How does that work? For someone that's like, I want to take the next step. I want to forgive. I don't know how. I feel like I've forgiven that person, but then I still remember the grudge and the memory of it all. So how can someone take the next step?
I'll go. Well, I think that's a great question, Natalia. I think, first of all, you have to make a decision that you want to forgive. And everything starts with a decision. And then there's a lot of different things out there, processes online and so forth, that can help people navigate the process of forgiving. We have a workbook on our website at timeforforgiveness.org that will actually walk people through the process. We've broken it down into 4 steps. And that's the PDF is actually available even free online. So we'd invite your guests to go on and download that. But there is a process, and I think it just comes down to making a decision. I think that you're going to do it.
I think one of the ideas, though, along with the process, is starting to really move into the state of gratitude. And most people would say that's interesting, gratitude. And, I really don't want to forgive this person. Why would we be grateful for them? But there's been research that it has even shown that it's got so many health benefits, but it also allows us to make better decisions. And when we think about the importance of that, gratitude puts us in a state of appreciation, like we go back to valuing the thing or the person, so we don't take it for granted. So I would really invite listeners to start a gratitude practice every morning where they write 3 things that they're grateful for, and really spend a minute with each thing and go into the state of gratitude, but then also send love to 3 things, people, circumstances that are bothering you. And that is always an interesting exercise, but it starts training your brain to be focusing and looking for the good in everything.
It's funny you say that. I actually started up a gratitude checklist I do every morning, and I have seen a difference in just my energy throughout the day, and I find more things to be grateful as I start writing things down. So I think that's a really cool practice, and that's kind of been a reoccurring theme on this podcast. Have you guys ever been around someone that has been unforgiving? What is their energy like? What is their personality? Can you illustrate an unforgiving person?
I mean, I think all of us have been around that. And I love that you said energy, because usually someone doesn't even have to speak words. You can just feel it. It's very heavy. And usually I have found those individuals that are not letting go and not forgiving, they don't really live a very happy life because they really haven't closed off space for anything new. They're filled with negativity and toxicity. And again, I think people in their minds, and I should speak for myself as well, after we experienced the tragedy, I had a really hard time forgiving that person. And I think I held on to it, and I think a lot of us do, because it was the one thing that I felt like I could still control. But I really started noticing health effects and just my energy and what I was sending out and attracting back, and I didn't like it. So I would really encourage anyone that's holding on to something just to become aware that you really are going to only attract back more of what you're holding on to.
Awesome. And what has been the biggest learning lesson ever since you started forgiving? What have you learned? What has been the biggest takeaway?
I think of this the power in just letting go, like letting go, that phrase, just letting go of things that are not serving you, in being in a state of unforgiveness is, whether the person knows it or not, it's not serving them. So I think it's an awareness thing. And the more that we become aware of really the laws, like everything's governed by law, and what we're sending out, Kelly said, we're getting it back. It's coming back. It may not be coming back from that person, but it's coming back. And conversely, when we're sending out the right thing, it's coming back as well. And so when we do forgive, it does benefit. Obviously, there's a positive intent for the person we're forgiving, but the real value and the real benefit is what it helps us to do. And Kelly mentioned freedom, and it helps us remain in a state of gratitude and love. And there's an energy around that. We do a lot. Everything is energy, and whether we know it or not, we're attracting back like energy. And so when we do become aware of that, then I think it's easier to make decisions around that, knowing that if I'm going to behave this way, there are consequences for it.
I think it's also, though, really important, like what I took from my greatest lesson with this journey, is that you're not going to be perfect. And, sometimes it's really hard. And you get to practice remaining in forgiveness. So you may forgive, And I think forgiveness has been honestly something kind of hard to teach occasionally because it's so rooted deeply in emotions and many layers of it. But what I have found is I started just to maybe identify myself as I'm the person that always forgives. And that's what I'm constantly suggesting to myself. And what I have found is it also invites extra opportunities to practice. So sometimes it's not very fun, but my brain actually, I start reminding myself, like, I am the person that always forgives, and I look to be the first one, which never was the case, you know, many years ago. But it's a really freeing thing. But I just wouldn't be so hard on yourselves. That's how I used to be. Like, you had to be perfect at this. It's just fun to start practicing.
Wonderful. And this might be a bit personal, but I am curious. How has forgiveness impacted your relationship together?
Mm. Wow. Well,
Putting you on
it's
the spot.
impacted our relationship. Yeah. There probably wouldn't be a relationship, Natalia, if we weren't able to forgive each other, because obviously there's many opportunities. I've had many opportunities to ask Kelly for forgiveness. And fortunately, she's extended that. But it's helped grow us in a deeper love for each other, knowing that we don't have to be perfect. We know we're going to mess up. Everybody does. But that our love goes beyond, these human limits. Like, and I think it's so easy to be offended. Like, that's the number one thing I think people struggle with. I struggled with it for a long time. Somebody does this, says that, I react this way, or this is how I'm going to respond. And I think through that, we've become more kind and compassionate with each other. Wouldn't you agree, honey?
Yeah, but I would think at the heart of it, it was the ability to kind of set the ego aside, the pride aside, and really because it takes a decision to do this, that I don't have to be right, because we all want to be right. And it's really kind of changing your perception and making a different decision of not what that I'm right, but what is best for the relationship.
And I want to add this too, that Natalia, that like when people do things, no matter how someone might perceive it, they are doing whatever they're doing. They're doing it because they perceive a positive intent in their actions and their behaviors. It may be something that we don't agree with and we don't really perceive where the positive intent could be. But I think if we can detach, and again, this idea of just letting it go, like we don't have to engage. We don't have to get emotionally involved with that behavior or what's happening over here. I think just because maybe we're conditioned to do that, we immediately react. But and this is something that we teach and something we've had to practice. Well, I grew up where you just immediately responded or reacted. This reacted, high volume, yelling, screaming. And so that's something that I had to become aware of and realize that no matter what's happening, even in our marriage, like in our relationship, it's much better to respond than it is just to react. But that is a habit pattern that you really have to develop and consciously work on. At least it was for me, and it still is.
Something I've noticed, and I'll get a little personal here. If I have said, okay, I forgive you, then a memory comes in 2 months later. I'm like, I remember you did that. Is that full forgiveness, or is that telling me, hey, you need to work on this again? Or is it just memory?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, forgiving someone is not necessarily forgetting in the sense that there's no accountability. That's not what we're saying. Forgiveness is really letting go. It's really for you instead of carrying this weight. But I really have possibly started looking at things in my life a little bit different, that those things that you're saying, that person did that to me, or it's really more of a lesson and it's here to teach me something. And I look at those things as more feedback of what I get to go work on. Because if I'm reacting, there's something inside of me that I need to really take a moment and figure out. But I just want everyone to understand that forgiveness, it's not that there's not accountability. It's not that there's not boundaries. It's that you are letting go of this heavy weight, toxicity in your own life so you can invite new.
Let's say there's somebody that keeps taking advantage of forgiveness. Like, hey, I'm going to keep doing this to you. I'm going to say sorry. I hope you forgive me, but I'm going to keep doing it. How do you deal with that? How do you set that boundary, and how do you figure it out for yourself to free yourself of that emotion?
I have a different perspective on it. I don't think anybody's doing anything to us unless we allow them to do it. And if this is a repeated behavior over and over again, that we're choosing to remain in a relationship with that person, or in a space where we're allowing them to affect us in a negative way, I think that's the first choice, is to disengage.
But I think it's also, yes, but it's also when we think about boundaries, we're looking about the boundaries that I'm going to set for somebody else. I really need to set a boundary for myself of what I'm going to settle for, what my standard is, and what I'm going to accept in my relationships around me. And just getting personal, most of my life, I realized I was just a really, really nice person. And with that nice person, it was this idea that I had to say yes to everyone so they'd like me. I've really moved into a space of I'm going to be a very kind person, but I'm going to tell people what maybe they do not want to hear, but it's going to help me grow and the relationship become better. So I've had, when you're talking about boundaries around forgiveness, I've noticed I really haven't had to forgive as much because I have set those boundaries that are healthy for myself first.
I think that's a great point, honey. And also to add to that, Natalia, you teach people how to treat you. And so if we're allowing something to go on that, as Kelly said, we don't, it's really not in our moral or our standard that how we want to interact or be treated by somebody, then we either need to let them know. If it's a relationship that we need to continue for whatever reason, then we need to at least be honest and let them know. That there's some relationships, though, that we just need to let go, that aren't serving us anymore. And that's okay too.
One thing I've noted that you guys are saying is a lot of it is taking accountability yourself. You guys are looking at it as there's things that I could control. And I feel like when people think of forgiveness, they're like, oh, I'm helping the other person let go. Like they said sorry and I'm helping them versus myself. But you guys are saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of it is really for you and freeing yourself, correct?
Yes, exactly. They may not even care that you've forgiven them. Maybe, a lot of times we're thinking about somebody else and they're not thinking about anything relating to what we're thinking about. Like they've moved on, but we're over here drinking this poison that just continues to send us down a rabbit hole, and they don't care at all.
But I think
So,
you had said they've moved on. Some are not even aware that they've offended us. And so if you're waiting for them to acknowledge that, you could be waiting forever. So
and the other thing I want to add too is, and this might be like something that you haven't heard before, but nobody can offend you unless you allow them to offend you. They have to do or say something, and then we have to think about what's happened and say, I am offended by those actions or that behavior. But we could choose to look at it differently and just say, I wonder what's going on with that person that's causing them to act or behave that way. Different question, different answer. So it's all in perception. But this takes awareness. It takes awareness because, again, here, this is more about thinking and responding versus just reacting. And that's where we lose control. When we just react, we give the other person the control. When we respond, we maintain control.
Oh, I've never really heard that perspective. That's a good one. Did you guys have like that aha moment, I've forgiven, I'm free? Or is it something that you guys have to work on every day?
Every day.
I think it's something, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you work on because you are remaining. It's not like you do it once and you're always there. But a personal experience of mine, when we go back to the movie and the story, that we experienced this tragedy, and my best friend was murdered along with her son by her husband. And it took a lot of time for me to let go of that. But I had thought I had let go of it. And I remember being asked to write a letter to him. And I thought, I don't need to do that. Like, I've already covered all that. But when I put the words to paper, so many emotions surfaced, and I had realized I really hadn't done that yet. And so that was a process for me. And I think part of it was, like you're saying, sometimes we're like, oh, I already did that, but there's many layers sometimes to this forgiveness thing. And we get to keep practicing and going with it further, if that makes sense.
You guys had different journeys on grief, and I'd love to get in on that. I think you guys kind of had different times where you've forgiven and then not so forgiven, you know? So I'd love to get into both of your perspectives. How did you handle grief?
Well, I guess I can give an example. When this event occurred, um, my friend, who I'd known for, I don't know, 25 years, when this murder happened, when this tragedy happened, I immediately went in a different direction than Kelly did. Believe it or not, I almost felt compassion for Danny because the person I knew, I couldn't in my mind get to a place where I could understand how this happened. Like, how did this guy that I knew commit this really heinous act? And so I kind of went into this mode of trying to figure all that out, and that led to many different things, and eventually the story unfolded in the book. But that's kind of the path I took. I wasn't judging him in a way. Almost, I didn't cut it off like you know. I kept an open mind to try to. I think it was because I became really curious in a sense that I really wanted to understand what happened that night and what happened to my friend, because I knew I missed something. And I think that was part of it. Like, there was a little bit of guilt there, and sadness that this person I was around a lot over all these years, I'm like, how did I miss this? Because I just couldn't wrap my arms around with what happened. But I know, honey, you can explain how you kind of went down a different path.
I went down a very different path. I had I was met with something called grief in a very, probably your most intense way ever. And I experienced so many emotions, of guilt and then anger. And I really had a hard time processing it, just even making sense of it, or even the ability to talk about it, because most people don't want to talk about, murder, suicide. And so there was even shame around it in a way. But I think when I really made progress in my grief was when I actually accepted that it had happened. And then I took control of what I was going to do with my grief. And I think this is an expression of using, which, sometimes we hear that, like, God's going to use everything for good. And then you're like challenging and testing him, like, you better show me, because I don't know how there's anything good in here. I certainly would have asked for it to not happen, but I couldn't change it. But I think the power of when I accepted that it actually did and made a committed decision of, this is what I'm going to do with my grief and use it for good, a lot of great things came from it.
How do you guys go around that feeling of guilt? There was nothing you guys could do at that time. There was no reason for you to feel guilty. So where did that guilt come from?
I think a lot of people experience guilt in regards, with grief, because it's always that what if. Well, what if I would have said that? Or what if I would have asked this question? And how did I not see the signs? And it could have been different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this loop, this constant loop. But then you're in the idea that you have control over any of that. And I didn't. But I spent a lot of time there, and it was not a healthy place to be at all. And I think it's coming to terms that I really had no control over that, but I certainly have control of what I'm going to do with it now.
I know time plays a big role in forgiveness and grief. What were the steps that kind of took you out of that? I don't want to say negative space, but that space where you were feeling that guilt, those negative emotions.
Well, I mean, obviously, time to process, first of all, like that was just unthinkable. And it wasn't, it was just so shocking. So part of that was that. But I will, credit my husband in a way because I think he was very aware that there was this calling placed on us to really bring this message of hope and forgiveness. And did not want to do it in the beginning. Like I was not there. But I think, being open is the big word I would say. Being open to inviting that opportunity and moving in the direction of, we may not know exactly what this is going to look like, the good coming out of it, but I'm going to say yes to it. And I think just starting to move it for good is what really helped in my grief.
And Natalia, I will add to that. I think the number one like determinant on how we process things is focus. Like, what is our focus? And we could have focused on all the negative things that came out of that and said, let's just sweep this under the rug and hope nobody ever hears about it. But we chose to kind of shift our focus and ask a different question: what good could we bring from this? And from that, here we are over a decade later, and it just started with the meaning that we are going to attach to it, because that's really the only thing that we do have control over. We don't have control over the events in our life. Things just happen, but what we do control is the meaning, and the meaning is going to control then what actions we take or don't take. So, I think we chose to shift and find some kind of positive meaning that we could then focus on and expand and bring this message from, and that's how it really all developed.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for sharing and being open. And I just have a feeling that there's a person that's going to say, well, you don't know what happened to me. There's a story and you
Yeah.
don't know, and this happened and I can't forgive this
Mm-hmm.
person. Is it because they feel like if they forgive, they're letting it go? Or is it, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts?
Go ahead, honey. You got this one.
I think, I mean, I can speak to that. I think it goes back to, first of all, it's maybe what you were conditioned to see, like that's unforgivable, or what society tells that you aren't able to forgive that. How could you forgive that? But I think for me personally, a big piece of that, it's you are holding on because it's the one thing that you still have control over, but it's not serving you. I know it was not serving me. And there was such freedom, like the weight that was removed, carrying that weight in my life. I mean, I still feel the change, I should say. Like it was so drastic when I just said, I'm finally letting this go. But I think people hold on to that because they're like, this is the only thing I can control, but it's not true. You get to control your response to it. And now what are you going to do with it? And there's so many opportunities to bring good out of, unfortunately, some of these events that we would not ask for in our lives.
I think the big question for me is the how. What is the steps? I want to see it. I want to know what I could do next. What is the how? How do I forgive?
Well, I think it's just, again, it starts with the decision to just say, hey, whatever happened, happened. We can't control it. And then choose to find a new meaning around it, whatever that might be for you in a positive way, and also then move it into just letting it go. I don't think there's really any, we have in our workbook, again, that's on the website, we have 4 steps. But I think at the end of the day, it's just, you just have to make a conscious decision that you're not going to carry this around anymore, because as Kelly said, it's not going to help you. And it affects you at a cellular level. There's all kinds of studies out there that show that holding on to unforgiveness, it affects your health. It affects your well-being, and it affects how we interact with the people that we love, and it's sending us down a road, whether we know it or not. It's sending us down a very unhealthy path. And so I guess our message to your audience is make a decision, because nothing starts without a decision, that I'm going to release whatever it is, because I know it's not going to help me in the long run, and I'm going to let it go, whatever it is. Just let it go, and then find the freedom in that, because I think when you actually engage in that process, you do feel the freedom, and it's at a cellular level. Like, we emotionally feel it when we do drop that piano off our back. And if we practice that, as Kelly was saying, if we get into a habit pattern of recognizing, because this could be a daily thing, right? I mean, that we need to let this go or that go. And if we get into that habit pattern of, as Kelly said, is we identify ourselves as a person that does offer forgiveness. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with condoning what somebody's done, and it doesn't mean that maybe you're still going to be interacting or you want to be around that person. It's not about that. It's about the awareness to know that this is a healthy habit pattern. It's a behavior pattern that I'm choosing to engage in, because it's for me. It's helping me. And with that awareness, I think it's easier to engage in that often.
We've heard from a lot of people that, forgiveness, it sounds like a really nice concept. Like, I like it, but I just don't want to do it. And it's something that you actually actively get to do. And we all have a relationship with it. Mm-hmm. Each and every one of us has a personal relationship with forgiveness. And I'd really encourage everyone to sit down and really take a moment and ask themselves, what is my relationship with forgiveness? Do I like it? Is it what I want? And if it's not, identify what it is that you would like to be living, how that would look like to be emotionally free. And then ask yourself, what is going to have to die off, or what am I going to have to let go of to experience that? And for those people that are like, oh, I don't really know. I don't know what I have in my life. I've let all that go. Something, I promise you, is going to surface for you.
You guys say emotionally free. What does emotional freedom look like? What does that feel like?
I think it is living void of worry, doubt, and fear in your life. And at some level, unforgiveness is tied to that. Whether we are aware of it or not, it's always tied to that. And so, as Kelly said, when you sit down and you really open your mind to it, but that takes somebody that consciously is willing to do that. But when we engage in that, something's going to surface. There's going to be something that is either that we're holding on to personally, or others that we need to let go of. It's an ongoing thing, as Kelly said. It's not a one-time thing. It just becomes part of who you are when you make a decision to come from a state of love and compassion and forgiveness, versus the opposite, because that's easy to do. I mean, most of us are conditioned to behave that way. At least I wasn't. And so it's the natural default for most people.
I think emotionally free, let me give you an example of what that feels like, because I've noticed that I'm living in that space now. And I wasn't a handful of years ago, but when I talked about earlier about getting in that state of gratitude, and like, you do your gratitude journal and what am I grateful for? That's easy. But then sending love to those 3 people or those things that are happening in your life that they're not really making you feel very good. I used to have no problem coming up with 3. I could come up with more than 3, but I don't have anything on that list very often anymore. And that's how I would describe emotionally free. I've just practiced, and I've started to train myself that I am that person that always forgives, and I am that person that lets go easily. Because I used to make it like, this is hard, and I used to tell myself that. Now I just tell myself that it's not that hard, and you can do this, and you get to practice it. You don't have to be perfect. And I don't know, I just, that's the feeling for me that I don't have many things to put on that list anymore.
Let me ask you, like the small things that irritate you, like somebody cuts you off the road. Are you guys like forgive easily, quickly, or what? How do you guys respond to situations like
Oh
that?
no, when that happens, Natalia, I retaliate. Retaliate immediately. No, but that's a great example. Like how you do one thing is how you do everything. There's a great phrase around that.
I
So,
think those things
yeah,
still happen.
they
I
happen,
mean,
but
let's be honest here. Those things still happen, but what's different about those things is you would stay in that negative state and just forget and ignore it. But now I'm so consciously aware that, ooh, wait a minute, I'm experiencing that negative feeling and I just reacted and I catch myself. And that's what's changed. And
I
when
think
you
it's
become aware of it, then it can be different the next time.
it true, and it takes Natalia. It takes a great degree of discipline, self-awareness, and discipline, not just to react, because that's a great example. Like somebody cuts you off, whatever, on the road, like the immediate reaction is like, okay, I'm gonna eye for an eye, and so I have to catch myself. I think it's the important thing is to catch yourself, and if you're moving in that direction, to try to correct it immediately. Like,
I think a
don't-
powerful question that we have used, and it really helps in those situations, is because we all have an opportunity, and it may be just such a millisecond where we're going to choose, we're going to react or respond. But I immediately, the thought comes in my mind, what could I be missing in this circumstance? And I do move to a state of compassion versus anger. And that has really helped me. And hopefully it'll help someone listening.
yeah, and another phrase that I think can help your audience is to become curious instead of judgmental. Become more curious. I wonder why that person is acting or behaving that way. It just helps us stay in control versus just reacting because somebody's doing something.
When you have forgiven someone, do you have to love them? Do you have to
I
love the
love these questions,
person
Natalia.
you forgave? It's just something I'm
No,
curious
I don't.
I
about
don't think
because I'm
so.
just like, well,
No, I don't
okay,
think so.
this person was so mean to
Yeah.
me and they did not show love my way. And I want to forgive her or them, and I will, but do I have to love them?
A great, I would say no, but a great example of that, I have a dear friend that experienced, quite a tragedy in her life. And I recently asked her how she was doing with her forgiveness piece of it. And she said, I used to have such anger and horrible thoughts to this person. And she said, obviously, I don't love this person, but I don't spend any negative energy with that person anymore. I choose to put all my energy towards something good and positive in my life. And she said, I feel like that's forgiveness. And I think if you have the ability to let go, again, I go back to this is more a gift for you than that person. I just, would you answer it the same way? Are you starting to?
No, I would agree. I mean, I think we can send love. We don't have to just that could just be, hey, I'm going to send love to this person. I don't know what's happening or what's going on that is causing them to behave in this way, but it's not. I mean, to the degree I think you're asking it, Natalia, no, I don't think that's necessary. I think it's a conscious decision, again, to just let this move out of your life.
Interesting. Because I always did wonder. I was like, well, you have to love everybody. Do I love the people that do me wrong? I don't know. Something I have to ponder on. But I know that you guys have started your Time for Forgiveness show, and you guys have had interesting guests that kind of talk about their grief and their stories. What guest or what story has left an impact on you? I'm sure they're all great, but what's one that was just, you can't let it go. It's still in your mind.
You want me to go? We interviewed a guy named John Burke, and he's the best-selling author of Imagine Heaven and Imagine the God of Heaven. And it was so interesting because he, over the course of his career, he's interviewed over 1,500 people who have died and come back, clinically died, near-death experiences. And the themes that he shared that he had learned with interacting with people all over the world I think it profoundly affected me because there were some themes in there that um, made me, when I heard him talking about it, it made me really think about what is our purpose here, and really that we're all one. We're all one. We're all interconnected. Even if we don't look the same or sound the same or live in the same country, that there's a theme, and it's all about it. And you mentioned it, Natalia. It's all about love. It's like, how did we love? Who did we love? And who loved us? And what kind of impact did we make? Did we make society a better place while we were here? I guess the formula after hearing all this is a lot simpler, I think, maybe than I thought it was. So that had an imprint on me immediately after that interview.
We had a gentleman that his son he was a police officer and was killed. And this gentleman invited the parents of the son that killed his son to the funeral. And I really had to sit with that for a minute because I thought,
Yeah.
wow, I don't know if I could have done that. And it sounded, he just was like, well, that's just what I had to do, because they lost a son as well. And it really taught me something about the idea of compassion, empathy, and how beautiful forgiveness can be. It was an incredible interview. And so that just also confirmed to me that it is possible for anyone to forgive.
Yeah, that's good. Good point.
Wow, that was very beautiful. I'm gonna go watch that after this. Uh, what would you? Can you guys illustrate yourselves when you were unforgiving? Like, is there a specific time in your life where you were like, yeah, that was someone I did not want to be?
Yes, I'll go, because it was really majority of it was directed towards myself. Very critical of myself, very unforgiving, like really just focused so much on, if you'd call it failure, like not meeting your own expectations. Like it was so much easier for me to forgive others than myself. And I think it wasn't really fun to be around myself. I was really hard on myself and not lighthearted. And the ability to let go of things personally, I've noticed even in our show, it's kind of starts with forgiving ourselves so we can start also offering that to others. But when I started to maybe appreciate those things in my life and look at them differently, knowing that they're just lessons, and they're giving me feedback and I get to learn from them and grow. That's, I think, what really changed for me.
Well, I think my behavior around it's a little different in the past. Before this event happened with our friends, I think I just would like, and this is what I saw and was conditioned, is that you just cut the person off, like they're just done. You're not going to interact with them anymore. And so it wasn't really, I guess I was holding a negative emotion, but I wasn't really, I think my way of dealing with it is I just removed the person from my life, and that was it. And sometimes that can't really work out very well. There are certain people that we do have to interact with. That could be, family is what I'm thinking about. But when I grew up, even if it was family was cut off, because they crossed the line or whatever happened. And that, I think that is more prevalent maybe in the Italian nationality. But I realized obviously that's not going to serve me going forward. And so that was something I had to correct and learn that I'm going to have to show more compassion and understanding.
With forgiveness, have you seen your relationships get stronger? Like, was there ever an example of someone that did something really bad to you, you've forgiven them, and the relationship actually turned out better?
Well, I mean, Natalia, I think like we experienced the ultimate example here with what happened with our friends and coming to terms with that. And then all of this that's happened since then, I don't know why it happened. Well, we're never going to know why it happened. But what has come out of it because of the way that we processed it into the decisions we made and how we choose to focus on what happened. I think it's a beautiful thing because we're sitting here now over a decade later, and we're on the cusp of, as Kelly said, this first annual summit, forgiveness summit, that there's going to be tens and thousands of people. There's going to be 3,000 people in person, and this is going to stream all over the United States. And I just think about it in the sense that if we weren't able to move through that and process it the way we did and offer forgiveness, we wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you about this.
But I think that, when you asked me that, there was just a long pause because I thought about the person that I forgave. They're not here anymore. So did the relationship get better significantly in that regard? It did for me to let it go. But my point of that being is I think there's so many people now that maybe feel wronged or they've unfortunately experienced something traumatic and that person is no longer here and they're still holding on to it. But there is benefit. And I will say it is a beautiful thing that I did let go of that and I forgave, and that we're literally sitting now having a show talking about forgiveness. And if I wouldn't have forgiven, we wouldn't have opened the space for this. So I guess that would be
Yeah.
our answer.
And I'll just add this, Natalia, that it's looking back now, we have the awareness. It's not about this book or the movie. It's really not even about the podcast. It's about sharing and like delivering this message around the globe. That's our mission. And we know that's our calling, is to help as many people as we possibly can experience the freedom and the transformation that forgiveness brings. And so that's really the mission that we're on going forward. And it just feels good to know that we're bringing hope, and that's what everybody needs. Everybody needs hope because hope creates options.
Very well said. We're wrapping up on time, but I do want to ask you one last question. If you guys could talk to your younger selves, whatever age that is, what would you tell them?
Yeah.
Life is short, just forgive.
Life is short. Just forgive.
I mean,
That's the tagline.
really,
Yeah.
I would tell myself that life is too short to hold on to all this. And
Mhm.
really, I would say that to myself. Like, lighten up. Life's too short. Forgive.
Yeah. And I would say just let things go easy, like much easier than I did growing up. Just let it go because there's very few things that really matter in the long run. I think it's easy to blow things out of proportion and see things in a different light. But when we get in the habit of just allowing and letting things happen the way they're supposed to, that's when I think we get in harmony with really what God has intended for our life, because we're really not driving the steering wheel, even though we think we are. But when we get in a state of allowing, I think our true calling unfolds for us. And I think that's what we've experienced over the last few years.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to start saying I am a forgiving person every day and see where that journey takes me. I just want to thank you guys so much for coming on and being open and willing to share your story and your wonderful advice. And yeah, just want to thank you guys again.